My Theatrics cost the bully his job and $10,000. Welcome back to Reddit Court Files, where we pull real stories from Reddit and put them on trial. Today's case comes from r/ProRevenge. Quick note, nothing in this video is legal advice. We're storytellers, not lawyers. Now, let's get into it. Act 1, wrong. When our storyteller was just 18, he landed his first real job in the Canadian oil patch. It was the early 2000s, and this was an incredible gig, paying $20 an hour with no experience or education required, at a time when minimum wage was less than $6. The job was called well testing. Essentially, you'd hook up a closed pressure tank and a flare stack to new oil and gas wells, flow them, and gather data for the oil barons. It was hard work, setting up and tearing down, but the rest involved recording gauges and computer work. Not bad for a first job. Except for Gary. Crews typically consisted of 2 men for 12-hour shifts, or 4 men for 24-hour shifts, with 1 laborer and 1 supervisor per shift. Our young narrator was paired with Gary, a mean-spirited, alcoholic supervisor in his mid-50s. Gary was overweight and lazy, only helping with things too heavy for our narrator to lift alone, like 250-pound pipes. Most of his days were spent in the trailer, watching DVDs, napping, and every hour or so, typing a bit of data into a PC. But what Gary really enjoyed was picking on our narrator with what he called jokes, which were really just insults. Our narrator wasn't a small man, about 6'1" in heels, and Gary was noticeably smaller, but our narrator lacked confidence back then, and had a baby face, which Gary seemed to prey on. He was called stupid a lot. One time, Gary discovered our narrator had never used a power drill and sneered, "Didn't your dad teach you anything?" Our narrator made the mistake of telling Gary that his father had only been in his life for a handful of years. The very next time he made a mistake, Gary quipped, "No wonder your dad walked out on me." Our narrator called him out on that, but like every other bully, Gary just told him he couldn't take a joke. They always worked far out of town in the country, and often had to eat dinner together in small town restaurants, mostly bars, if they could help it. Gary drank a lot. He could actually be personable when not at work, and at least 2 drinks deep, but he didn't stop and drank every night. It quickly became the norm for our narrator to drive them to work in Gary's truck. Gary made $1 or $1.10 per kilometer, and they could drive anywhere from 100 to 350 kilometers per day, every day for weeks. For reference, 100 miles is about 160 kilometers. Our narrator, meanwhile, got minimum wage for his travel time. Gary was hungover most mornings, didn't want to drive, and simply told our narrator he was the boss. He'd sleep like a gin-bloated corpse until they got to work. This went on for 3 months. 3 months of demeaning treatment and verbal abuse. Our narrator admits he doesn't react much. He gets silent, but everyone has their breaking point. He needed the job, but he wasn't going to take it forever. Act 2, the fight. One night, while they were out of town on a job, during dinner, our narrator mentioned to Gary that it was pretty lame he slept most of the time while our narrator drove his truck, and Gary got paid for it. Maybe he ought to kick a few bucks his way for the effort. Gary did not like that suggestion. The last hinge must have crumbled, because Gary came unglued. More verbal abuse, and our young narrator was actually reduced to angry tears. When Gary threatened his job, it was a bad feeling. So, our narrator resolved to at least get away from him. He'd been taking notes anyway, because he wanted a different crew. His breaking point was achieved. This is usually when his instinct for self-preservation diminishes, and impulsive thoughts have fewer safeguards. He wanted to go home, not revenge, but serendipity delivered the next morning. Gary was once again in his travel coma, and our narrator drove them to work. About 30 kilometers from the site, on a pullout on the side of the highway, was a semi-truck. And as luck would have it, it was running, and the trucker was outside his rig. Our narrator quickly formulated a plan. Gary always needed to be woken with intent, so he didn't stir when our narrator stopped, got out, and asked the friendly driver for a favor. The trucker agreed to his terms, got back in his semi to await the signal. Gary, blissfully sleeping off the last of his nightly whiskey, also failed to notice when our narrator maneuvered his truck, parking it nearly bumper to bumper, facing the big, beautiful Peterbilt. Our narrator lit the beacon. The truckers of Rohan answered with their own headlights. Like the horn of Helm Hammerhand sounding in the deep, the trucker hit his air horn with amazing commitment to instilling fear. Our narrator did his part by honking Gary's truck gleefully in respite and screaming his ass off. He cried bloody murder at blast level and yelled, "Fuck, we're gonna die!" Striking like a battalion of bombers singing a chorus of fire, the glorious cacophony lasted less than a minute. When it hit him, Gary dented the ceiling. Good thing he was thick as cement, or that might have hurt. He rocketed up with such force because the amount of shit he rapidly expelled into his pants kept him in debt to his own bowels until retirement. The wonderful sound of his anguished howls segued quickly into apoplexy and rage. While coming to terms with what our narrator had done, Gary couldn't correctly choke out his death threats. Our narrator reversed, peeled off before Gary decided to get out to make good, and gave the trucker a wave. He got about 10 meters down the road when Gary felt the need to tell him he had dangerously high blood pressure, and our narrator could have killed him with a stroke. About 4 years later, our narrator went to paramedic school, so yes, in hindsight, he agrees with Gary's assessment. But at 18, he legitimately had no idea what a stroke was. What would he even do? Probably ignore him, like they did with Stalin. He'd have thought Gary was just extra hungover, or being lazier than usual by pretending half his body was paralyzed. Dead. Our narrator started laughing and told Gary he should probably calm down then. He said, "Can't you take a joke?" Gary kept making incomplete threats, and our narrator just couldn't stop laughing, making it even funnier when Gary wouldn't shut up. Don't feed it, Gary. Our narrator loved ugly laughing at angry people, calling himself a hyena. Gary was fighting the urge to kill him and the desire to not stroke out simultaneously. The struggle was real. It took about 20 more minutes to get to the site, and that dance continued the whole time. Our narrator even asked Gary if that was his normal shade of red. Arriving, Gary ordered him to get out, said he was fired, then stomped off to call the company owner. Act 3, the win. Whatever, our narrator thought. He had intermittent chuckles and smoked cigarettes while savoring his Pyrrhic victory for the 4 hours it took the company owner to come pick him up. It was a medium-sized business, about 100 employees, and the owner was also the general manager. Our narrator got some details. Gary wanted to involve the cops for attempted murder, but the boss dissuaded. Gary had told one hell of a tale that left our narrator looking like Satan. So, on the way back to the city, our narrator told the boss all about the necessity of Gary's punishment. The boss had a good chuckle about it. He was actually a decent guy. Our narrator ended up working for him until he went back to school. He got moved to a different crew where he could be the lone sociopath. And that was about it. He also got some serious street cred with the rest of the boys at the company. Turns out, sometimes, confronting a bully with a little dramatic flair is exactly the kind of joke karma enjoys. That's the verdict on today's case. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was justice served? Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a filing.